The diocese has a rule, an investment rule. I call it the diocesan investment rule, but they have a process where they take the 3-year average for the previous 3 years on a fund. They average that end of year balance for the previous 3 years, and they come up with an average balance, and then they draw down 5%, and that's the earnings that they contribute to the operating budget. And so we follow, this is the rule that we follow. The donors left us the money to manage. They didn't tell us how we had to spend the money. In a couple of instances, they said we couldn't spend below a certain amount, but we've never been told that we had to spend all the money. We've left the management of the funds to the church. And so we follow this diocesan rule. And what you can see, and you can just track it a little bit, the last several years, the stock market has just gone crazy positive. So you've seen this growth every year in the growth of our endowment funds over the previous year, when we're only drawing down 5%, and the diocesan average has been over 10% a year, sometimes bordering getting up close to 15% a couple of years. So we're making 10% on our funds that we haven't spent, and that's why you see this growth in the funds. So we use the diocesan fund, and we have kept pace. Now, what we did do, people have expressed concern, I think that's a fair way to put it, that the value of our fund has exceeded what would normally be a legitimate need for endowment funds. And so we have increased, and they thought that pledge wasn't so important because we had all these endowment funds. And these aren't all of our endowment funds. These are just the ones that go into our operating budget. So we increased our draw to 5.5%. And that adjusts our operating budget, and we spend those monies to support ministry. So that's where the 5% comes from. What this does do, it does a couple of things. Now you're seeing in 2022, you're seeing the value of the fund decrease. The way that this sort of it cushions a blow, if you did it just 5% at the end of each year, you'd see major fluctuations in the amount of money that you would draw down in a given year. By taking the 3-year average, it sort of flattens the curve a little bit. So you can see if you're adding 2019, 2020, and 2021, your average really right, it's about the middle year. So this will grow over time. In a declining year, you won't see major decreases. The decrease will be smaller. It'll flatten out. So that's why we use this procedure. We follow the diocesan rule. I call it a rule. Paul Cooney was the one who introduced me to this, and they would change. They didn't strictly use 5%. They would fluctuate, I think, between 4 sometimes and 6. But we've stuck pretty much with 5 to 5.5. So these are how we use the funds. As I think I mentioned earlier, the diocese has significantly more investment endowment funds than Grace Church does. And they have enabled us to use their services to invest our funds with their funds. And we get a break in the fees because I don't know how much the diocesan fund, the diocese probably invests more than $30 million. And so they get a discount in their fees because they have such a large investment pool. They let us piggyback into their funds. And so our fees are significantly reduced over the management fees that we would pay if we had our own brokers. So we use their funds, and our experience is that it saves us a couple. Number one, in my view, the diocesan funds are extremely well managed. They have an independent board. They're very conscientious. So our funds perform very well. Again, when you see a drop, we don't take the drop. When you see a sharp surge, we don't get the full amount of the surge. But again, our annual growth has been between 10 and 15% the last 3 or 4 years, which is not insignificant. We have access to our funds whenever we need them. So I can, by email, there I'm authorized, and anybody who's authorized could do it. Contact, it's the Wilmington Trust, request a drawdown generally within a week. We will have the funds sometimes, if it's depending on the timing, it's 7 business days, but generally we get the funds we need within a week, and there's no limit to the number of withdrawals that we can make over the course of a month or a year.